Hey, how's it going, everybody? Hope you're doing well out there. Today, I'm going to be going over the PRO-800 program section right here. This entire section and how it relates also to the Unison knob, so that's kind of part of it as well. Now, what I'm going to do when I'm going over this is I'm going to focus primarily on the sound design aspect of this section right here. And when I say the sound design aspect, what I mean is particularly how it affects the envelopes, the modulation wheel, and the other sort of like LFOs, for example, Unison settings, and so forth. So that is the primary focus. The other settings on here, for example, which are not directly related to sound design in particular, such as, for example, we have the settings mode, which covers like MIDI channel inputs, your clock synchronization sources, your arpeggiator and sequencer if you're using something like a DAW-less setup. I'm going to go over all of these, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to explain what each one of them does, and I am going to go over all of the functions here. So stick around for that. But then once I go over and give an overview of all the functions, I'm going to focus in particular on this performance function, which is really where the sound design aspects come in, as well as preset management. So once you change something, how to make sure that you record the preset and save it in the correct place, overwriting, and so forth. That's going to be kind of like the secondary part. So we're going to go through all the functions, the sound design elements, and the preset management. And we're going to focus in on the sound design elements in particular. Sound design elements in this case, we have the LFO, the vibrato, the modulation wheel settings, envelope shape settings, pitch bend settings, the function of these oscillator frequency knobs right here and how they work and the different ways that you can set them up. And we're going to go over velocity settings, aftertouch settings, and Unison, as well as the glide mode. So those are the main sound design functions that I'm going to get into when I say the sound design functions. And the difference between the sound design functions and other global settings functions is, for example, like when you go to performance, which is where most of the sound design functions are located, or you could say all of them, they save with the preset. So when you set something like envelope shapes, etc., they're going to save with the preset. When you set something like in the global settings, for example, transposition, different MIDI data and voice, like killing voices and things like that, or like note priority, those are going to be global synthesizer settings, and they're not going to save with the preset. They're going to transfer no matter what preset you work with. And also they're going to carry over. If you turn the synth on, you turn it back on again. So you have to be careful with that, with changing settings, because you might change something and then you're going to have to figure out what you changed if you wanted to go back to how you think it was functioning normally. So let's kind of start off, and we're going to go ahead, and the first thing I'm going to do is go through these one by one, and like these buttons right here and what they do. And then once I explain one by one what they do, and I give a broad overview, I'm going to go ahead and start diving into the sound design specifics. Okay? And by the way, you can see right on the screen right now, there's a note sheet that I created. It's actually not so much of a note sheet as it could basically be like a secondary manual, because I feel like really these sound design functions are not covered in the PRO-800 actual manual very well, or really at all, frankly. I was kind of surprised. And I watched a couple videos, but I noticed that they updated the firmware. So some of the videos that I watched were even outdated, like the functions were different. So this is the latest function as of October 2024, and I doubt they're going to change it now because they've already had time to, update the firmware since the release. So these are the latest sound design functions. And again, this whole manual that you see right here, which covers all the sound design functions in depth in PDF format, as well as the functions of all the other buttons and how they work. And even though I'm not going to go specifically in depth, for example, here on the settings and like the MIDI configurations and the arpeggiator and the sequencer, if you check out that manual, that I actually just straight up took some of the publicly available manual and copied those relevant sections into the pages of my manual, as you can see here. And basically, you're going to just be able to download that and read all that in depth so you can go over it yourself. And that is available right on the link below my page. There's also patches there, just so, you know, go check those out. The patches that I made for this synthesizer. And I have some patches for sale there, but the download of this manual is 100% free. So just go ahead, click on that link. You'll see a button to download the manual. Just go ahead and download it, and you can use that as a supplementary manual to the main manual. And I hope you enjoy that. And that's just kind of my gift to everybody. So go ahead and check that out, and let's start getting into the main functions, okay? So this preset button controls a selection of presets, and it controls the recording and saving of presets, okay? And just generally speaking, if you press the preset button, you can go ahead and use the knob function right here to change and scroll through the different presets that are saved. And if you just hold it and then press 1, 2, 3, or 4, you can select the different banks. And I'm going to go over the procedure for how exactly to record and save presets and overwrite them. Now, performance here, this performance button, when you click the performance button, you're going to be able to click through all of these, and these are all the sound design functions that I talked about. So when it comes to the functions that actually save with the patch and that relate specifically to sound design and patch design, which are like, could be called like the hidden functions that you don't see on the panel here, these are all under the performance tab. So that's that, and I'll show you exactly how to use that when we get into the in-depth. But basically, again, you're covering like the LFO, vibrato, and all those other things that I spoke about earlier. Then here you have the settings. The settings are the global functions, okay? And when it comes to the global functions, again, it's kind of like these don't save and they're not patch specific. They're global functions. If you go to settings, you can see the exact chart. I put it in my manual for download there, and that just ripped straight from the publicly available manual. But basically, it's like if you go to settings 1, that's your MIDI CC and routing and your general MIDI routing. You go to settings 2, that's like a global transpose if you want to do that. Settings 3, and that's like a preset dump for the SysX. 4, you can like use that to kill off voices, like if you want to turn this into a 5-voice synth, etc. Be careful with that because that does save, and when you re-upload or restart, when you restart the synth, you might think, what's going on? My voices are gone. So be careful with that one. Then you have retuning settings on 5, 6. You have like things like screen brightness on 7. 8, you have auto tune settings. And 9, you have like external filter modulation. So you're going up in the filter CV in plug up at the top, as well as the voice priority settings. And 0, you have the factory reset. So there's like a procedure there described in the manual that I've provided of that's in the actual manual itself for the PRO-800 as well, how to do a factory reset. So that's what the settings do, and you can hear how those are all like global things. They're not related to specific patch or sound design. Tune basically is just like tuning the synthesizer. When you short press it, that does like a full tune from scratch. When you long press it for a few seconds, it's like a light tune, and the light tune is kind of better to do if your synth has been on for a while. But personally, that's what the manual says. I just do the full tune every time, so it's really up to you how you want to do it. You just press tune and you wait for it to finish. Okay, your sync source, the purpose of the sync source is when you select the source for the clock to synchronize. Now the clock is basically controlling the speed of like the arpeggiator and the sequencers, like the beats per minute. Okay, like what controls that tempo, that click track. So you can have like internal, like there's an internal BPM counter. You can have your MIDI in. You can have from the plug up there, there's a sync in plug, like from a modular synth or something. Or you can do USB in. Okay, those are some of the options for the sync source for the clock. And the sync clock is like a tempo. So like, for example, you can go like quarter notes, half notes, eighth notes, 16th notes, etc. as far as like the speed relative to the sync source. All right. Record, that has to do with record like for presets, or you can record for the sequence 1 and 2. And the sequence 1 and 2 is like a sequence which you can record into the PRO-800 by using a procedure that's described in the provided manual, and which again is also in my manual that I've copied that section straight out of the provided manual. And you press record basically, then you press a sequence, you type in your sequence, and then you can press one sequence or two sequence, and you can play both of these sequences back. This is more like if you're doing a DAW-less, like without a digital audio workstation, hardware only setup. But if you're doing hardware only, which I don't do, by the way, which is why I'm not really focusing on that, then these can be very useful to put the sequence 1 and 2 to be aware of your clock settings and so forth. The arpeggiator up and down, you click and hold this. You can select 1, 2, 3, 4 for different arpeggiator settings, like modes. And you just generally turn the ARP on or off. Be aware of some of the factory presets. They have the ARP on, which means that unless you're running a clock from whatever the sync source is, when you play a note, you're not going to hear any sound. So if you play a note on a factory preset, you don't hear any sound, like in Bank 1, make sure that ARP is turned off. You can just turn it off, and then you'll hear, like, you'll be able to play the notes individually. Just be aware that that's tied to the sync source and the clock. Okay, and then the ARP assign, that's just a very simple button, and that determines, like, using the procedure in the manual, if your arpeggiator goes by, like, the sequence of keys you press, like 1, 2, 3, 4, or if it's just random, like you hold it down and it selects on its own where it starts, and so forth. So those are all the buttons as far as like what they do, and that's like your general overview. And then you have the value encoder, which is like once you select an option of what you're doing, like where you're going to go into, for example, your sync source, or, you know, some particular parameter here, the value knob is what changes that knob, that setting. Like when you're in preset mode, you have, you know, you change your presets with the value knob, or you can actually type it in here now. They updated the firmware. Originally, I think it was just the value knob, or it was the other way around. Doesn't really matter, but you can do it both ways now. So this is where I'm going to go ahead and go over the recording aspect of this of the presets right now. So what happens is this: when you select a preset, like let's say I have my bank right here is bank B, where I have my patches loaded that I've created. So right now I have the preset selected, which means that this is showing me the preset number specifically. And like, look, I'll play a few notes. If you switch it, like let's go to B45. So that's like another lead sound. Now let's say what I did is, you might not be able to see it here, but there's a cutoff filter right here, which is just like the filter knob over to the right. If I start playing with my cutoff filter knob while I have my preset loaded, like right now you'll see here, this is not blinking or anything, it's just regular. But you change one thing, like I just changed my cutoff. What this preset flashing now is because it basically means like you have changed something. So it's letting you be aware that you have changed something on the synthesizer, and it's different than your saved preset. So if you changed your preset, okay, the way that it works is that this light is flashing. So if you want to, like let's say I turn my cutoff down on this sound, And that's a lot, like the cutoff is low relative to the original preset sound. If I just press the preset button again, now it's back. That means I've just canceled out any changes, like it just reloaded this preset. So you'll see, even though I didn't move my frequency knob back up, when I play it, it just plays the regular sound. For an example, like I'm going to go to bank, hold this preset down, and go to bank 4 because I've copied some of my presets to bank 4 just so I can kind of play around with them a little bit. And you can see how things change and I don't mess up my bank B here. So you just hold this, you go to bank 4, that's bank D. So let's say I have that sound, okay, that's my lead number 42 in bank D now. It's actually the same as my bank B, it's just this one I can modify without feeling like I'm erasing anything. And that's something you always have to be careful with on this synth, is like, be aware of like where's your copies, where's your originals, and make sure that you're not overwriting something that you don't want. That's why it's so useful to know how this record function works. And I actually think this is not really presented very much in the manual. It's kind of odd, but that's what it is. So let's say I have this, and again I change my cutoff. Again, if I press that preset button to cancel out that blinking, it just takes me back automatically to the default. Now let's say I wanted to modify that particular setting, and I want to save it into this preset. Okay, what I would do is I would change what I want. Now keep in mind this number, which is the number of your preset, because once you save it, this is going to go blank. So you're going to be asked, where do you want to save this? So you're going to have to remember, like, you want to overwrite it on top as number 42. You'll see right now what I'm saying. So to overwrite a preset, all you have to do is, once like you have it how you want, let's say that's how I want it, okay? I want a little lower cutoff, for example. Then all I do here is I would press record. You see how it blanks out? I told you have to remember that number. So we're going to type in 42 to overwrite that preset 42. Now, if at this point you can see how the record is still flashing, if I say, you know what, no, I changed my mind, I want to cancel that, I press record again. It says save canceled. Now I'm back to my regular preset light here. I'm going to be back on my default sound. Actually, I have to, in this case, because I went through that procedure, I have to reload it. There we go. You can see how it didn't save. You know, once I reloaded the preset, it loaded back my regular preset, it didn't save. Now, if I do want to save it, again, let me turn down the cutoff again. Then what I do here is I press record. I go to 42, and to finalize that save, I click preset. Now your preset is solid, your record light is off, you're at 42. This is your new 42 preset. So if I go back out and start another one, now I go back to 42. You can see how it saved that change, and that cutoff is now down. Okay, so that's how the preset saving function works in the overwriting. That's really not in the manual as far as I could see, so I had to kind of figure that out. But there you go. I hope that's helpful as far as how that works. By the way, again, all these presets come in my Prophecy sound bank, which is at the link where you get that manual and you'll see the video. That's where all these sounds come from. When it comes to the physical mode, I would call it like the physical performance mode. So like right now, obviously as we change presets, this synthesizer doesn't have like robotic knobs or something like that. So like if I go to 43, every time what happens is you load all new functions, but you don't see it right here unless you move one thing. So you always have to keep track of like what you moved. And again, remember, you want to cancel something, how to cancel the record or how to cancel out your preset change. I just went over that, right? So you start moving things, you're like, oh, I screwed up the preset. You just cancel it out, you reselect it again, and you're fine, okay? Now, let's say you want to go to the physical editing mode. What you do to go to the physical editing mode is you're going to go click performance. You see, now this is the hidden screen editing mode, which I'm going to go into next, which is the basically editing the performance options and the sound design options. But when you click this twice, so you're going to see here the preset is no longer shown and it's performance only. Now what happens is exactly what's right here is going to be what's playing when you play the note. And if this particular synth is set up as some kind of weird configuration from you playing around with it, you go to performance mode, you're going to get some kind of weird sound. It's going to just basically turn into an analog synthesizer, like as if, you got a physical control analog synth. So you're going to have to reset and see, okay, what, because everything here is what you get, except right here, all of these hidden functions are always running in the background in performance mode. And I'll just show you real quick, start to kind of go into this, but click 1, 2, 3, all like vibrato and all this other stuff. That counts as part of your physical controls. So that's also like whatever settings you have loaded up here, play along with this situation. Okay. So that's important to know. Now, so there's that. There's like how you go. And now if you want to go back to the preset from here, you just click preset mode and you're back at preset loading. Now be careful. Sometimes it's a little bit funky. Sometimes it just gives you an indication like something has changed just from even like a small movement here or something. It could be anything. So like, again, if you haven't changed anything or whatever happens, you just click on that preset, you're back to regular functionality. So if you just want to like get out of that edit and you want to move to the next preset, if you see this is flashing, you can always just press it back like this and get back into your preset selection. Okay, so that's how that works. Now we're going to go into the sound design parameters under the performance option. Okay, so that's the next part of this video, and we're going to cover all of those in depth. And again, that manual that I put there, this is like not written in the manual for the PRO-800 for whatever reason, but that I did a full write-up on this, and that's all in that manual that I said is in the download link. So it's like a whole second manual just for covering this, as well as all the other things in overview, some of which I grabbed from the original manual. Okay, and it's like several pages just covering this performance and the sound design functions and what every single setting does. Okay, so there's two ways of using this particular performance option. Okay, and way number one is like when you're in preset mode, when you select performance once, then when both of these are when both of these are lit up, when you start selecting these numbers, you can see like this is LFO shape, vibrato, speed, mod wheel. So now when you're pressing these buttons, it's no longer selecting presets because your performance mode is on. Each one of them selects a certain performance mode sound design option. The other way is like if you're in performance mode only, then what happens is automatically, like all you got to do is press these once, and they're just like part of your sound design with whatever's on the body. So let's go through these one by one, and this is again all in that manual that I've provided. So when let me just do this. I'm going to put up two oscillators here, and it's going to be like two sawtooth oscillators. Well, no, let's do like two pulse widths because we're going to do some PWM a little bit. Make sure all the LFOs and all this stuff is down. Okay. there's like a very straightforward sort of like 2 square waves, kind of slightly detuned so you can hear what's going on. Okay, so we're going to go to performance 1. That's your LFO shape. Okay, you see this as PLTR. So this is pulse triangle. If you look at the LFO all the way to the left, this is pulse and triangle. Okay, now if you move this over, like you remember you move the value over, that changes what's in this number. So now we go to random sine. So there's a random in the middle, and there's sine wave on top. And then you go here. This says noise, and S, like this is like a saw, upside down, A, W, whatever. Noise saw. There's your saw, there's your noise. So the way that this works is like, you'll see that this knob, it's not like a clutch, like a car clutch where it has 6 positions. It only has 1 or 2, right? So what happens is you select the 3 from the 3, 1, 2, 3 rows using this, and then you select the top or the bottom using this knob. So I'm not going to go into like basic sound design and how to route LFOs because that's not the purpose of this video. But we're going to go here and just route the LFO to your frequency. Okay, AB for example. Now, actually, yeah, so let's do that, and let's just turn this down. I'll say why I said actually later, because there's a AB routing. But let's just go to the frequency and turn this one down. Let's see, make sure that this is, there we go. You can hear how that's a saw, that upward saw. Or you go down here, that's a noise. Those are very useful, cool shapes. So let's say I wanted to go to sine wave instead of that saw, right? How would I do the sine wave instead of the saw? Well, you go up, you're going to be back at the saw, right? So to go to the sine wave, that's where you go to performance and you go to 1. So we were already here, but you click on it till you go to LFO shape, and you select random sine. So now I'm at the sine at the top, or at the sine, or at random. Or you can select one over, pulse triangle. So up at the top is triangle, bottom is pulse. Okay, so it kind of goes horizontally like that. Then when you go to the next menu option, you just click that one again. And so this is like going through the values of each option and clicking these buttons numerous times goes through the menu options related to this. So it's like kind of a hierarchy. So like this is the button for LFO. And again, this is all in my manual, so you don't have to memorize this. Okay. This is like number 1 is the LFO. Then when you click through 1, you go through the different options: LFO shape, LFO target, LFO speed. Okay, so like we went through LFO shape, you click it again, LFO target. The target options are this: A, AB, just B, or the VCA. Okay, AB, you can see that here. It's kind of an A-B. Again, this makes your horizontal setting for you in this performance menu. So AB means like this LFO controls both A and B at the same time. So let's say your pitch. So let's bring this one back up again. You can kind of hear it's controlling both. But let's go to just A. What happens here, it sounds like that because it's only doing the LFO and oscillator A. Because we went to the left, but it's not doing it on oscillator B. Or we can just do it on oscillator B. Again, that's got a different sound. Now VCA is your volume. Okay, it's just like a tremolo kind of option. So you get this sort of like a gated effect. Those are your options, and you can pick one or the other. Okay. Now keep in mind, like let's say I chose the VCA. If I go to the next menu option, like my speed, it's gonna stay stuck on that VCA. So like you have to always keep track of what you changed, because if you don't, you're gonna say, why is this having this effect? So remember, like my LFO, even though I put to frequency here, it's not gonna have an effect on the frequency because I only put it to VCA. Okay, Keep that in mind. So like I wanted to have the effect in the frequency, I got to change that back. LFO, and you get used to this once you start kind of playing with it. Okay, let's say I want to go back to AB, which is the most standard way. There we go. Okay, now you go to LFO speed. Now I'm being a little more slow on this first one, how I explain it, because I want you to understand how like these buttons interact with the knob and how you switch through the menus. But once I start explaining the functions on the other ones, I'm just going to go more into the functions without having to re-explain, okay, you click this knob 3 times to go to the next one, and this is how it works, and so forth, because you'll kind of know. This is like the most important aspect. Okay, so like LFO speed, fast or slow. So this is just kind of like a relative speed, like you kind of have a slower LFO or a faster LFO. That's on slow. So like, but the benefit is this gives you these really slow waveforms that you're not going to get if you're on fast. This is your slowest on fast, right? But you get much faster. Okay, so there's that. Now, that's the last one is, let me see, LFO shape, LFO target, LFO speed. That's it. So that's, now remember again, whatever you set here, it's stuck. So like if you want to go back and change it, you have to keep track. Like my LFO was set to this. Now one way to keep track is just to get used to how it sounds. So immediately you know like, oh, it sounds like this. So this is what it's doing. You know, and you kind of get used to that over time. So we went through the LFO. This second one right here, let's turn this down. Second one is a vibrato. Vibrato is another LFO, only to the pitch of both oscillators at the same time, like a global pitch, and it's an entirely separate LFO. Okay, so it's totally separated from the regular LFO. So like we go to vibrato, and we can go to vibrato amount, and then we can go to vibrato speed. So it's always a sine wave. There's only one shape, and all you get is speed and amount, and it's always to the pitch, but it's totally separate from this. So you can have a vibrato running and then use your LFO here for like another function. So it's like you actually have a secret LFO right there for the pitch. That's what it is, okay? Now let's go to vibrato amount, turn it up. Now you see it's not gonna do anything. And the reason for that is because by default, this vibrato amount is tied to the mod wheel. So meaning like this sets the maximum of the vibrato for when you turn your mod wheel to the top. So I'm going to turn my mod wheel to the top right now. If I turn this lower, this amount, and I turn my mod wheel to the top, it has less and less effect. So you kind of fine tune it how you want. Right? And then you got your LFO vibrato speed. So that's like, turn my mod wheel up. And again, that's totally separate from this. So I could have another pitch LFO running here. Like this. Like let's say I have something very fast running here by default. Like a random one. I can still use my vibrato. Can't hear it as well, but I could turn the amount all the way up. See how they're both running at the same time? It's got a weird sound. Right? So that's just moving that mod wheel up and down. So that's vibrato, and that's how it works separate from the LFO. Now here we go to mod wheel, and the mod wheel amount, okay, and then you got a mod wheel target, and then a mod delay, okay, mod wheel amount, target, and delay. So let's start with target actually, because when you go to mod wheel target, you have these options. You have either LFO or you have vibrato. A default is set vibrato, which means that that vibrato amount only works using your mod wheel. Okay, but if I took this to the LFO, you'll see what happens. What happens is when the mod wheel is connected to the LFO right here, instead of the vibrato, when you go back, you can do a vibrato amount like this, and it's going to be on by default. Right? no mod wheel because the mod wheel is to the LFO. So let's turn that back down. Remember, these are all saved in here. So we got our mod wheel target LFO. Okay, now the thing about LFO that's a little bit different from this particular situation here with the vibrato is that this gives you an initial amount to begin with, and then you get an LFO amount on top of that. Okay, but the LFO amount on top of that is not set through a control here. Again, this is kind of complicated. You just rewatch the video and practice with it, and you start to memorize it. It becomes intuitive. But the amount is not set through the through a button like it is for the vibrato. The amount is set through like a menu function combined on top of the initial amount. So like, let's say I do a vibrato through my LFO here. But let's say I want to do a very low one like this. You can barely hear it. Okay, now since my modulation target is the LFO. Okay, the target again. Oh, there it is. There's the LFO. Okay, let's go to the modulation amount. And that's basically like the same as the vibrato strength here. So like right now, like that. Low. I don't know what all these acronyms mean. You can kind of read it. It says low here, which means like it has a little bit on top of the initial amount. Versus like high. Okay, there's high and there's full. That's kind of like your strength on top of the initial amount. And then this is like none. So, supposedly it's, I don't know if that's none or NIN, whatever. It's almost nothing. It's very low. That's what it is. Okay, another thing that you have here is very interesting. Again, this some ways this is kind of counterintuitive, but this particular there's like a modulation delay right here, and this modulation delay, it allows you to bring in one of these modulation sources, like the initial amount here or that vibrato, in such a way that it like fades in, but without being connected to the mod wheel. And that's useful because of like which one is not connected to the mod wheel. It's either like all the way up or however up it is, or it's all the way down. There's no fade in unless you connect it to the mod wheel and you manually bring it in, right? So when I connect, for example, this LFO to the mod wheel, then I can manually bring in with the mod wheel the strength. Or I connect the vibrato to the mod wheel. I can play those notes and then bring it up and then put it down, right? But if I don't connect the vibrato, for example, to the mod wheel, and I have it running, as soon as I press a key, what happens here, let's take this let's take this delay all the way down. I have my vibrato on like really strong right now. I set that up that way. Right away, right? You get that full amount right away. But because right now this is not connected to the mod wheel. My LFO is connected to the mod wheel. If you look at the mod wheel target, okay, it's LFO. So the vibrato starts right away. But by changing the delay, it controls the fade in of the one that's not connected to the mod wheel. So like, let me show you here. I'm going to turn that delay up, and you'll see how that vibrato fades in automatically, even though it's not connected to the mod wheel. So like, let's say I want that automatic delay, and let me just now get my vibrato sounding good. Sometimes that screen like shows what, like starts showing different things that you're doing, so just use your ears. See? So now I have an automatically fading in vibrato just without using the mod wheel. So now I have my mod wheel still routed here. That's the mod wheel on top, right? Or for example, if you were to have a different kind of... So that's my mod wheel. So you can see how those interact and how one controls the one without the mod wheel. Okay, so let's bring that vibrato. Again, remember how all these get stuck, like meaning like they're saved in there. So you gotta keep track of them and go back, and like you want to get rid of that vibrato, go back and get rid of it. This one, VCA envelope shape and VCF envelope shape. Okay, all this basically does, I'll explain it quickly. I'm not gonna like sample all of the categorizations for you, but VCA is like your volume. So that's your VCA envelope, which is over here. You can't see it off the screen. And then your VCF envelope, which is also over there. So like, for example, the easiest one to hear is, let's go to like the VCF envelope. And then this is slow linear, fast exponential, fast linear, and then you get slow exponential. So those are just different shapes for the envelopes. So like we're doing now slow exponential. So let's bring in like a filter envelope. That's slow exponential, fast exponential, fast linear, and then you get slow exponential. Okay, so those are different envelope shapes, and those save with the patch, remember? So it's like sometimes like you can use like fast linear, fast exponential for like rolling bass lines, and then like for pads you use like slow linear, slow exponential, etc. So kind of play around with that. Okay, and then we go to number 5. This one's pretty straightforward. Your pitch bend target, VCO. Okay, well, you have your pitch bend target, your pitch bend range. Okay, so those are the two options. You can get VCO, VCF, or volume, or off. So VCO is your standard pitch bend, which means it's connected to the pitch. Let's put that filter back up real quick. Okay, but once you got that set up, you have your VCO. If you put it on VCF, the pitch bend no longer affects the pitch, it only affects the filter. Let's put that filter down a bit. Let's take off. Then the next one is your pitch bend range. Okay, so like your pitch bend range, you can select a bigger range. Now let's go to back to pitch bend target, for example, and we do volume. So if you select a really wide range, like let's see what the maximum range is here, 31. It has a bigger effect on that volume. Or let's say the filter, for example, has a much bigger effect than if you put the pitch bend range lower. So these numbers kind of relate to semitones, and they also relate to just general values if you're doing it on your cutoff or your VCA. So like if you want to like use a regular pitch bend, like for your pitch, your VCO, let's just change this to something a little bit lighter, like 2. And then, there goes. Oh, I guess, there we go, 2. And then you go to pitch bend target, VCO. There you go, just like that. Okay, and then we got that. So that's the pitch bend. And then here, this is the oscillator frequency pot node. Okay, so the way that this works is like, this controls how you can tune your oscillators. And this basically has OSC A or OSC B, and then keyboard tracking, which is actually related to your filter keyboard tracking. But let's focus on OSC A and OSC B. All right, so you have the OSC A here. This is free tuning, which means basically that like if I'm running only OSC A pitch and I'm gonna tune it, Oh, here, hang on. Where are we at? Osc A. You have to select it. Okay, so like now it's octaves. You hear that? How that changes it by octaves? Whereas like if I went to semi, it goes by semitones. If I went to free, it's a free pitch knob. This can be very useful when you're like setting up like frequency modulation and things like that. Sometimes you have to like really retune it exactly to a certain place that's not like some semitone. So that's when the free becomes very useful. Or you can select, where are we at here? Fixed. Fixed has no keyboard tracking. This is again very useful for like frequency modulation. You can, like I'm playing notes and it's just taking the clicking sound. I'm playing different notes. No keyboard tracking. Okay, so if you know how to use frequency modulation, that's very useful because that's how you get a static oscillator shape, or not a shape, but a static oscillator pitch. Keep in mind, if that's fixed and you start playing around with other things, and you're gonna forget that, and you're gonna say, "What's going on with my keyboard? It's not working." So go back and check that and make sure the normal one, typically for the oscillators, is going to be semitones. That's kind of the most normal one where things stay in tune. Okay. And it's literally the same thing with the oscillator B, except you get this fine tuning knob on top of it. Okay. It's exactly the same options. And then let's go to this last one here. This is keyboard tracking. This determines like a pitch for your keyboard tracking. Like what is the medium pitch for the keyboard tracking of your filter? So if I put my keyboard filter on, you can't see it here, but I put my keyboard tracking for my filter on full. Okay, and let me bring my filter down. As I change this pitch, the center pitch, it goes up. So that just determines the center pitch for your keyboard tracking. Okay, now again, this is all saved for patch, so each patch is going to have a different one. Unless you just have one that's default across all the way through or whatever, if you want to change that. Now let's go here. This is very straightforward. This is velocity. So you get VCA velocity, VCF velocity. Okay, VCA velocity is just like your volume. So you just determine like how much of it you want it to affect with your velocity. Like a lot. If you turn it all the way up, you can get like... You can hear there's like a big difference. If you just want it a little bit, you just select a small number. Okay, same goes with the VCF velocity. And this VCF velocity affects the envelope amount. So it's a little bit different, so just be aware of that. But like VCF velocity, you always have to like select what you're looking at and make sure you're back in that menu before you start editing this value knob. Right? So you can hear how the velocity is changing the filter. Okay? And you can use them both at the same time, like some amount of VCA and then some amount of VCF. And again, this gets saved in the patch. This is Aftertouch AT amount. I don't actually use an Aftertouch keyboard. It's great if you're doing like a lot of cinematic stuff, but other than that, like making pop tracks and dance tracks, sometimes it just depends on what you think, but not everybody uses it. I don't use it, but it's the same exact concept. Basically, VCA Aftertouch, VCF Aftertouch, except here you have a LFO Aftertouch, which is like how much your Aftertouch controls the LFO strength. Okay, I can't demonstrate it because I don't use a Aftertouch keyboard. Then here, this is Unison Spread. This is one of the final tricky ones here, and we're getting towards the end. So like Unison Spread, Let me kind of bring this back. I'm going to go, before I go in the unison spread, I'm going to go to this unison concept here. When you turn up the unison, you should know what unison is. I mean, if you don't, you can look it up, but basically all the voices play at the same time. So like this is an 8-voice synth. So you have all the voices playing at a detuned spread at the same time when you turn on unison, and your synth becomes monophonic. It's good for like gliding sounds and things like that, right? So the unison spread, oh, you see, why do I have nothing? You got to remember we're in our performance. Always make sure which buttons are lit up. It's a little bit finicky, but you go to unison spread, and then you can turn this up and this detunes that unison. More and more or less. That's all that unison spread amount does. Now here's the other thing about this unison. Okay, there's a couple little tricks to the unison, which is this, that like if I hold down one key while I turn up my unison, while I'm holding that key, you'll notice I don't get any unison sound. When you hold down a key, you turn up unison. Also, you don't get unison spread. You just get a single pitch monophonic synthesizer. So this is great for, again, these like gliding and lead sounds and things without unison. This turns it into like a Moog monophonic synth. Remember, you hold the key, you turn on unison. If you're not holding a key when you turn on unison, you get regular unison with that unison spread. Okay. Now, another thing with the unison is like, if you're holding down multiple keys, when you turn it on, you get a chord. Okay. Check this out. So like, that saves that chord in the memory. So now I play one note at a time. So you get unison chord notes, up to 8 notes at the same time. That's great for like, you know, house and techno and things like that. Right? So you can get those kind of chordal tones using that unison stack with a chord held down. Now, one last trick here with the unison and this unison spread is when you're not using the unison, this unison spread has an effect. And you might say, okay, how does it have an effect? So like normally when I play a chord without unison mode, I just get a very clean sound. But if I go here and I go to voice spread, it's either on or off, okay? Normally it's off. When you turn it on, what happens is this unison spread amount starts to affect your chords when this unison is off. Check this out. I'm playing regular chords. So you actually start spreading your chords, and this is great for like if you want these kind of more vintage sloppy chord sounds, like you can kind of turn on a little bit of that. So that gives a unison spread to every note of your chord when you're not using the unison. So that's what that particular function does. Now the last one we're going to go to is here. I'm going to go to Program Select, and that's just your glide. Okay, this is a glide mode, and there's only one option here, and that's you can choose time or you can choose speed. Time is like a regular, most common glide mode. Basically, this sets a time of your glide, and this is like how a 303 works, or a Moog, or a lot of those other monophonic synths and things like that. Basically, you can hear it always has that same speed, like If you turn it to rate, what happens is instead of time, speed actually in this case is called. It has a longer glide when you play longer notes apart. But if you play them very close together, it has a shorter time. So it's not time based. It like stretches the time depending on how far the notes are from each other. So that can be very useful as well. And keep in mind it's like per voice. So like you'll really hear it when you're using monophonic mode or like unison mode. Okay. And when you're not using like a monophonic or unison mode, then notes like glide around for each voice. So like when you play one voice, you might notice inconsistency with your glide times. And that's just because it's like literally each voice has its own glide. Like it has its own memory of where the last note was, which it can actually create a lot of great effects for like moving chords. Thus you get that polyphonic glide sound. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that tutorial and all those aspects of the synth and you learned a lot. Again, please remember to download the manual from that link down below that I created and check out the patches. Subscribe to my channel, like this video, and have a great day.